Let's talk about Israel preparing to attack Iran. And it's vowing to do everything necessary. America, on the other hand, has said that Israel's retaliation will be calculated and limited. Let's take a look.
Thanks for the advice and support, but Israel will make its own decisions. That was the message from Benjamin Netanyahu to his British and German visitors who came here to Jerusalem today. Now, they are now at a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Italy pushing for coordinated sanctions against Iran. But their calls for restraint do not appear to have stretched to Gaza, where the killing goes on unabated, or to the West Bank, where tensions have also been escalating. Here's our foreign affairs correspondent, Sekunda Kamani.
Hezbollah rockets and drones slam into northern Israel, injuring 18 people. Retaliation for Israeli strikes yesterday that killed 2 of the group's commanders. There's now a global effort to prevent a similar, far more dangerous cycle of tit-for-tat attacks breaking out, with Hezbollah's key ally, Iran. It fired a massive barrage of missiles at Israel over the weekend. Retaliation for an earlier Israeli strike in Damascus.
If
the Zionist regime makes the slightest move to violate our territory and harm the national interests of the Islamic Republic, they must understand that they will face a severe and heavy response.
I answered them as best as I could.
Trying to convince Israel's Prime Minister to act with restraint, Britain's Foreign Secretary, as well as Germany's top diplomat, visiting Jerusalem today.
The situation is very concerning. It's right to show solidarity.
Yes. Except Lord Cameron talked to Herzog, the president, and found out very quickly that from one pig fucker to the next, that he said it's clear that Israel will respond to the Iranian attack. Yes, very nice.
With Israel, it's right to have made our views clear about what should happen next, but it's clear the Israelis are making a decision to act. We hope they do so in a way that does as little to escalate this as possible.
Sorry, I apologize. My mistake. Earlier I said pig fucker. I should have said Lord Pig Fucker. That's right. He is a pig fucker, but a lord at the same time. The proper nomenclature is important to be used in this circumstance. Lord Pickfucker, David Cameron.
And in a way that, as I said yesterday, is smart as well as tough.
The international focus is on tensions with Iran, even as Israeli strikes on Gaza continue. Nowhere else comes close to the terrible death toll here, but this is already a conflict with many different fronts. The occupied West Bank is emerging from days of violent unrest, with Israeli settlers rampaging through Palestinian villages, killing 4 people, torching homes and cars. Israeli settlers have been growing increasingly violent, emboldened by the rise of extremist political allies who are now at the very heart of government. And
I mean, they already were emboldened by that. The thing is, right now, they're also taking advantage of the lack of attention being paid to the West Bank. That is what is happening, by the way. They've been emboldened. They've been getting like actual logistical support from the government because Itamar Ben-Gvir is doing everything he can. He was like arming them, giving them fucking literal IDF gear and shit. Yeah, we watched the settlers lighting a car on fire, setting a Palestinian car on fire, and then the soldiers just like idly standing by. But yeah, basically the settlers are like, never let a good crisis go to waste. And they're taking advantage of the circumstance by really increasing the pressure and increasing the violence in the West Bank because they're fucking freaks.
By Israel's war in Gaza. Futna and her young family were amongst those who fled in terror.
We were so scared. We started screaming and ran out of the house without taking anything with us. We took our children and escaped. They have been very badly affected. My youngest son hasn't spoken since.
But you'll stay here?
Guys, Channel 4 does incredible work on this process. I don't know why you guys like hyper focus on the aesthetics of the language that Channel 4 is using. It's like getting mad at me for saying something. Come on. This is in the Western media, Channel 4 is one of the only consistently good coverage that you will find on Palestinians. And they have been doing that from the jump. It's actually shocking, especially considering that they're British. And like, if you think America is up its own ass with our ultra Zionist attitudes, like England is a whole different fucking ball game. They are nutty mode over there and have been for a very long time. Al Jazeera, I do not consider a part of Western media. Okay, I'm saying that out of mainstream outlets in the West, which does not mean your favorite fucking independent journalists or whatever. I'm talking specifically like CNN and BBC, Guardian, Sky News. Channel 4 is one of the few outlets out there, very few, that is consistently good.
My land, my children, our memories. Our life is here. Where should I go? This is the place my son was born. Whatever happens, I will stay here.
The rioting began after the disappearance of a 14-year-old Israeli boy. Soldiers later found Benjamin Achimeah's dead body, saying he was killed in an attack by militants. In response, furious settlers targeted more than a dozen Palestinian villages over several days. Part of a wider, accelerating effort, residents say, to try and drive them out.
Like, here's a great question. Why should they not do this? They're literally just doing Israel shit. They're doing more Israel. Except this time it's not like a legal entity doing it. It's terrorism, but it's still state-sponsored terrorism. It's a literal pogrom that the Israeli state is offering. The Israeli state is offering security to. Because when they do this shit, the IDF is supposed to stop them from doing this, right? Technically, under international law, Israel is an illegal occupier of the West Bank. They shouldn't even be there. But like, even in the most extreme circumstances, like the IDF's goal is to stop the settlers from fucking doing this, but they just sit there and defend the settlers and shoot at the fucking Palestinians. And the state is arming them to do this. So why wouldn't they do this? They're fucking insane. Why wouldn't they do this? Imagine a world where if the American government, for example, was, let's say, routinely trying to prosecute trans people, okay? Routinely trying to prosecute trans people, and then giving weapons directly to like Christian fascist militias to go out and hunt trans people, okay? Yeah, they would go out, bust down doors, and start killing a bunch of people that they assume are trans. That's it. Now, obviously, we haven't gotten to that final part of the, anti-trans pogroms here in the United States of America, but the better analogy would have been against black people in the globe. I was about to say global South. Black people in the South. That is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened with the Klan and with all of the fucking lynch mobs. When the federal government stands idly by and basically pushes the needle in one direction or tips the scales in one direction, then yeah, you're getting the go-ahead. They're basically outsourcing the awfulness that they were going to do anyway to independent and very interested outside contractors
from their communities. Some of the violence took place under the watch of Israeli soldiers. Here they do nothing to stop an arson attack. The army has said this incident is being investigated.
And then they investigate themselves. Like, every part of this, like, what are you going to investigate? Oh, wow, we investigated and we found no wrongdoing. It's like, oh, man, great. The legal process works, I guess.
Israeli settlements carved into the occupied West Bank are considered illegal internationally and make a two-state solution appear impossible.
It is impossible.
Those
they do
building
make
them
it impossible.
believe this land was promised to them by God.
Yeah, and their numbers have grown dramatically over the course of the past couple of decades. Just remember, during the so-called peace process, this is what the Israeli government was actually more interested in doing and did successfully with our go-ahead. in the United States of America.
Today, close to where the unrest took place, settlers returned to plant Israeli flags by the road, flaunting their presence and their power.
And Secunda is with me here in Jerusalem. I mean, so everyone is wondering when this is going to happen. If Britain at least is now saying it believes Israel is going to act, what's the timing?
Well, look, referring to international calls for restraint, Prime Minister Netanyahu said today he'd had all kinds of suggestions.
So let me ask you this. 75 years of this nonsense with very little recognition, from the international community, and like maybe a gentle tap on the fucking wrist every now and then. Why shouldn't the Israelis think that they are, one, God ordained? These freaks certainly do. Not all Israelis feel that way. It doesn't really matter though, because they still do want Israel. But why shouldn't they do this stuff? There is no accountability. There is no mechanism of restraint. Why the fuck wouldn't they think that this is totally valid? We've enabled them. We've enabled them from the fucking jump. Israel considered striking Iran on Monday, but decided to wait, officials say. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. That's the whole point. The point I'm trying to make is this. Israel could not exist with our funding and our consistent aid, okay? And when I say our, I mean the entire Western world, but especially the United States of America. And if we are responsible for Israel existing in the violent ways that it is, and I believe we are, how the fuck have we not restrained them at all up until this point? And even now, we are not restraining them. We're just not. Why should they stop?
And advice, but that Israel would make its own decisions. It does seem, as you've said, that some kind of response is inevitable. As to when it might come, one factor could be the Jewish holiday of Passover, which begins at the start of next week. Would Netanyahu want to risk ruining that for Israelis by launching an attack just beforehand, meaning it would be overshadowed by the threat of Iranian retaliation? On the other hand, does waiting until the end of a week-long holiday for a response to what was a very large and unprecedented missile attack by Iran feel too long?
Now, limited and narrow is this phrase that is being used. Now, that's what Iran seems to have told its allies. We understand that's what he's told the British meeting today. The big question is, how will Iran see it?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, you get the impression from the Israelis that just like the Iranians, they do not want to go to a state of all-out war. But at the same time, for a long time, Israel's military policy has been that when you're hit, you hit back so hard that your enemy doesn't ever strike back again. Of course, the reality is things don't always play out like that. And as you've said, what's seen by the Israelis as a fairly targeted, narrow strike that presumably wouldn't cause civilian casualties, wouldn't target Iranian nuclear facilities, might not necessarily be seen as so targeted or reasonable by the Iranians. I mean, underlining how much of a risk of miscalculation there is. Remember the miscalculation Israel made in thinking about Hamas prior to October the 7th. They thought that Hamas in Gaza was not interested in entering.
Why would they do it when Israeli citizens don't want it? I don't think Israeli citizens, I don't know. The poll I've seen was roughly 50-50. Okay, that's good enough for me. That is the most amount of restraint you're going to see from the Israeli population. If it's 50-50, that means it is actually, there is enough distaste. Because if you look at, especially when you look at the demographic breakdown between, and this is, once again, Israel's own demographic breakdown, not mine, the Jewish population of Israel versus the Arab population of Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel versus the full-blown citizens of Israel, and their interest in pummeling Gaza, the numbers are not around 50-50. Times of Israel poll, 74% of Israelis oppose counterstrike in Iran if it harms security alliances. Over half of Hebrew University survey respondents see the need to consider political military demands from allies, say U.S. aid in thwarting attack obligates Israel to coordinate further actions. If it compromises security, I mean, it does compromise security. So, that is much more reasonable. Israel has vowed to retaliate after Iran overnight Saturday fired over 300 missiles and drones at the country. Almost all were intercepted before they reached the country as the United States led a coordinated air defense shield that involved Israeli, American, British, French, and Jordanian forces, reportedly along with radar and intelligence input from some Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia. Survey conducted at Hebrew University shows that the public is divided on the question of whether Israel should respond to the Iranian attack that took place on Saturday night. 74% oppose a counterattack if it undermines the security alliance with Israel's allies. 52% answered that it is better not to respond in order to end the current round of conflict, while 48% answered that Israel should respond, even if that means the price would be the extension of the current round. Yeah, this is definitely very different than at least all of the polls that we've seen thus far from the Israeli population that talk about continuing the attacks on Gaza. It's not just the broader public, though. Netanyahu's base absolutely wants retaliation. Yeah, the Bibists are fucking insane, but hasn't their political power waned over the course of the past couple of years, and especially post October 8, post October 7? So yeah, Bibists are like the fucking Trump MAGA hogs, like the most aggro. Well, they're not the most aggro. I'm sure there's the Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and all of the other fucking settlers who are hyper focused on, you know, pogroms in the West Bank and shit like that. But Bibists are the still a very, very far right constituency, because striking Iranian soil directly will absolutely meet the standards that the Iranian government has placed upon Israel in their retaliation. This would go beyond a tit for tat, and that would actually be an open declaration of war. Iran would absolutely fucking retaliate way harder with no 72-hour response, most likely. I mean, this goes further to prove the point that I make all the time, by the way, which is that Israel only responds the force, and the Israeli public only responds the force. You can tell, like, the fact that they're so split on this, the fact that they know that escalating the conflict to Iran would actually bring home into Israel proper the conflict in ways that, like, pummeling Gaza never can. It's just like, because these guys aren't saying, let's not attack Iran because, oh no, we'll kill a bunch of Iranian civilians. I'm sure some feel that way, but many are not saying this because they fear that, like, Iranian lives, they fear that, like, they fear for the safety of Iranian citizens. They are making a calculated decision. That's why the number is 74% if it undermines the security alliance with Israel's allies, whereas 52% answered that it is better not to respond in order to end the current round of conflict, as in just keep up the genocide that we're keep up the genocide, eyes on the prize.